Hello, and welcome to Gears of History. The word samurai usually brings to mind a very specific image, doesn't it? A noble warrior in elegant armor, a katana gleaming at his side, living by an unwavering code of honor. We imagine a life of martial perfection, philosophical wisdom, and heroic battles fought for lords and emperor. We picture cherry blossoms falling as these warriors compose poetry between duels, their spirits as refined as their swordsmanship. But the real life of a samurai during Japan's long feudal period was far more complex than legend suggests. It was a life bound by rigid hierarchies, crushing expectations, and constant anxiety about honor and status. It was a world where a single misstep could mean ritual suicide, where loyalty often meant serving cruel masters, and where the gap between the warrior ideal and daily reality could break a man's spirit. So tonight, we will leave the legends behind and see what it was really like. We will walk through the gates of a provincial castle town in the year 1650, during the Edo period, and experience the weight of the two swords at your side. We'll learn about the Spartan meals you ate, the fears that haunted your sleep, and why being born into the samurai class was both a tremendous privilege and an unbearable burden. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a simple and wonderful way to support the channel, and it means a great deal to me. I'm also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you're joining me tonight. So I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. And now settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away. And let us travel back to a time of wooden temples, strict social codes, and the way of the warrior. Our story doesn't begin with a battle. It begins with you waking in darkness. It is 4 a.m. on a cold autumn day in the year 1650. You are lying on a thin futon in a small room with bare wooden floors and paper walls so thin you can hear every sound from the neighboring chambers. The air is frigid, your breath visible in the pre-dawn darkness, and you are already awake before the first servant comes to rouse you. This is not because you are eager to begin the day. It is because you never truly sleep peacefully anymore. The weight of your obligations, the constant awareness of your status and the expectations upon you, the fear of making some error that would bring shame upon your family name, these things have stolen restful sleep from you years ago. You are 26 years old. Your name is Tanaka Masayuki, and you are a samurai in service to the Matsudaira clan, a minor branch family related distantly to the Tokugawa shogunate that rules all of Japan. Your stipend is 200 koku of rice per year, enough to support a small household but nowhere near enough to live comfortably or without constant worry. In the rigid hierarchy of samurai society, you occupy a middle position, above the Ishigaru foot soldiers and the lowest-ranking samurai who serve as guards and attendants, but far below the senior retainers who advise the daimyo lord and manage his domain. Your father was a samurai before you. His father before him served in the great wars of the previous century, when chaos consumed Japan and powerful warlords battled for supremacy. Your grandfather actually fought in battles, actually swung his sword against enemy soldiers, actually lived the warrior life that every samurai child dreams about. But you have never seen combat. You never will. The country has been at peace for nearly 50 years, ever since Tokugawa Ieyasu unified Japan and established a shogunate. The age of warfare is over. The age of bureaucracy has begun. This is what your life is now. You are a warrior with no war to fight, a swordsman in a world that no longer needs your sword. And yet you must maintain the appearance, the discipline, the readiness of a warrior at all times. You must embody the ideals of Bushido, the way of the warrior, even though the reality of your daily existence involves more paperwork than swordsmanship, more ceremony than combat. You rise from your futon in the darkness, your muscles stiff from the cold and from yesterday's training. Your small room is austere, containing only the essentials, a wooden chest for your clothing and armor, a small alcove with a hanging scroll displaying a verse about impermanence, the rack for your swords. There are no decorations, no comforts. Such things would be unseemly for a samurai. You are supposed to live simply, without attachment to material possessions, always ready to die at a moment's notice. But the truth is that you do not feel ready to die. You feel tired. You feel worried about money. You feel anxious about the inspection that will take place today, when the senior retainers will review the readiness of all the samurai in your unit. You feel the dull ache in your left shoulder from an old training injury that never quite healed properly. You feel very, very human, despite all the talk of transcending human weakness through spiritual discipline and martial training. You dress in the darkness, pulling on the layers of clothing with practiced efficiency. First, the fundoshi loincloth, then the white cotton juban undergarment. Over this, the kosoed robe in subdued colors, dark blue or brown, never anything bright or ostentatious. Samurai are expected to dress with restraint, to show through their appearance that they value discipline over vanity. Finally, you tie the hakama, the wide pleated trousers that mark you as a member of the warrior class. The fabric is rough against your skin, washed so many times it has lost any softness it might once have possessed. The most important part of dressing comes last. You reach for your swords, the longer katana and the shorter wakizashi, both resting on their stand. These two blades, called the daisho or big little, are not merely weapons. They are your soul, according to the teachings drilled into you since childhood. They represent your honor, your status, your very identity as a samurai. Only members of the warrior class are permitted to carry two swords. A merchant or farmer found with even one would face immediate execution. You slide the wakizashi into your obi sash first, then the katana, positioning them just so on your left side. The weight is familiar, comforting in its own way, though you sometimes wonder about the irony. These swords that define you as a warrior, that you have trained with since you were 7 years old, that you maintain with meticulous care, you will almost certainly never draw them in actual combat. The most likely scenario in which you would use your sword is to commit seppuku ritual suicide if you bring dishonor upon yourself or your lord. This is not a pleasant thought at 4 in the morning. You slide open the shoji screen that serves as your door, careful to move it quietly so as not to disturb the other samurai sleeping in the adjacent rooms of this long wooden barracks. The corridor is dark, lit only by a single oil lamp at the far end. The floorboards are nightingale floors, designed to chirp and squeak when walked upon, a security measure to prevent assassins from moving silently through the castle compound. You have learned to walk in a specific way, placing your weight just so that minimizes the sound. It is one of 1,000 small skills you have acquired, none of them particularly useful, all of them necessary. You make your way through the darkness toward the well in the courtyard. Other early risers are already there. You can hear the splash of water, see the dim outlines of figures performing their morning ablutions. The air is bitingly cold. Frost glimmers on the stones of the courtyard. Above, the stars are beginning to fade as the first hint of dawn touches the eastern sky. You draw water from the well, the rope rough in your hands, and pour it over yourself. The shock of the frigid water against your skin is like being stabbed with 1,000 needles. This is intentional. This discomfort is part of your training, part of the discipline that supposedly strengthens your spirit and prepares you for hardship. You have been doing this every morning since you were a boy, and it has never gotten easier. You have simply learned to endure it without flinching, without showing any sign of weakness. As you dry yourself and adjust your clothing, you notice other samurai emerging from the barracks. Some are older men, veterans in their 40s and 50s, their faces weathered and expressionless. Others are younger, some barely old enough to have completed their Jinpuku coming-of-age ceremony. All of them wear the same austere clothing, carry the same two swords, move with the same practiced dignity. In the growing light, you all look remarkably similar, interchangeable parts in the great machine of the Matsudaira clan's military bureaucracy. No one speaks. Conversation before morning training is considered undisciplined, a sign that your mind is distracted by trivial social concerns rather than focused on preparation for combat. So you all move in silence through the cold morning air, heading toward the training ground. The training ground is a large rectangular courtyard covered in packed dirt, surrounded by wooden buildings on 3 sides and a high wall on the 4th. Racks of wooden practice weapons line one wall, Bakken wooden swords, Yari spears, Naginata polearms. At the far end stands a row of straw targets for archery practice. The ground is uneven in places, deliberately left this way to make training more difficult, to ensure that you learn to fight on any terrain. Your instructor, Yamamoto-sensei, is already present. He is a man in his 60s, thin and hard as sun-dried wood, his face a map of old scars. He is one of the few samurai in the domain who actually fought in the wars of the previous century, who actually killed men in battle. This gives him an authority that goes beyond his official rank. When he speaks, everyone listens. When he demonstrates a technique, everyone watches with absolute attention. He stands in the center of the training ground, utterly still, his eyes closed. He might be meditating. He might be sleeping. With Yamamoto-sensei, it is impossible to tell. But you know better than to disturb him or to speak in his presence before he acknowledges you. Gradually, more samurai arrive. There are perhaps 30 of you in this training group, all roughly the same rank, all serving similar roles in the clan's administration and military reserves. You know most of these men well, have trained alongside them for years, eaten with them, served guard duty with them. But you would not call any of them friends. Friendship implies a certain casualness, a letting down of guards, that is discouraged among samurai. You are expected to maintain proper distance, proper formality, even with those you have known since childhood. When the sun finally breaks above the eastern wall, casting its first golden rays across the training ground, Yamamoto-sensei opens his eyes. "Begin," he says. Just that single word, spoken quietly, barely above a whisper. But immediately, all 30 samurai move into position, forming neat rows, each man an exact arm's length from his neighbors. No further instruction is needed. You have done this every morning for years. The training begins with suburi, basic sword cuts, repeated hundreds of times. You draw your bakkin wooden sword from your sash and hold it in the proper two-handed grip. Then, in unison with the other samurai, you raise the sword above your head and bring it down in a straight vertical cut. The motion must be precise. Your left hand must remain at the base of the handle, your right hand just below the guard. Your hips must rotate properly. Your feet must maintain the correct stance. Your breath must coordinate with the movement, exhaling sharply as the sword ascends. You do this again, and again, and again. Yamamoto-sensei walks slowly between the rows, his eyes missing nothing. Occasionally, he stops beside a samurai and makes a small correction, adjusting the angle of a wrist, correcting the position of feet. He never raises his voice. He never needs to. The shame of being corrected is motivation enough. After 200 vertical cuts, you switch to diagonal cuts from the right. Another 200. Then diagonal cuts from the left. Your shoulders are beginning to burn. Your grip is becoming slippery with sweat despite the cold air. But you cannot slow down. You cannot rest. You cannot show any sign of weakness. Around you, the other samurai continue with mechanical precision, their faces blank, their breathing controlled. This is what being a samurai means in practice. Not glorious battles. Not defending the innocent. Not honorable duels against worthy opponents. It means standing in a cold courtyard at dawn, repeating the same motion hundreds of times, striving for perfection that you will never achieve because there is always some minute flaw in your form, some infinitesimal way in which you could be better. After suburi comes kata, prearranged forms that simulate combat scenarios. You pair up with another samurai, a man named Kobayashi who is a few years older than you. You have been partners for over a year now. The kata you practice are ancient, passed down through generations, each movement refined over centuries to represent the perfect response to a specific attack. Kobayashi attacks with the overhead strike. You step off the line of attack at precisely the correct angle, parry his blade with exactly the right amount of force, and deliver a countercut to where his neck would be. Then you freeze. Yamamoto-sensei walks past, examining the position of your bodies, the distance between you, the angle of your swords. He nods slightly, not approval, merely acknowledgement that this repetition was acceptable. You return to the starting position and do it again. Perfection is not the goal, because perfection is impossible. The goal is endless refinement, endless practice, endless repetition until these movements become as natural as breathing, until you could perform them in your sleep, until your body responds correctly even when your mind is paralyzed with fear. But when would you ever need these skills? When would you ever face an actual opponent trying to kill you? The country is at peace. has been at peace for 50 years, will likely remain at peace for 50 more. The Tokugawa shogunate has forbidden warfare between domains, has dismantled most castles, has established such tight control over the daimyo lords that armed conflict is virtually impossible. So why do you train like this? Why does Yamamoto-sensei push you with such relentless intensity? Why must you strive to become a master of skills you will never use? The official answer, the one given in all the texts on Bushido, is that training is not about practical preparation for war. It is about character development. It is about learning discipline, focus, perseverance. It is about transcending your base nature and becoming something more refined, more controlled, more perfectly aligned with the warrior ideal. The sword is not a weapon but a tool for polishing your spirit. This sounds very noble, very philosophical, and perhaps there is truth in it. But you suspect the real answer is simpler and darker. You train like this because the samurai class must justify its existence. In an age of peace, in an era when merchants grow wealthy through trade and farmers produce the rice that feeds everyone, what purpose do warriors serve? If samurai are not fighting, not defending the realm, not performing the function they were supposedly born to perform, then why should they receive their stipends? Why should they maintain their elevated status in society? The training provides an answer. It shows that samurai are different, are special, are worthy of their position. Look at us, it says, look at our discipline, our skill, our dedication. We may not be fighting wars, but we are maintaining a standard of excellence that justifies our existence. We are preserving the martial traditions. We are ready, should the need ever arise. Whether anyone actually believes this, you cannot say. You certainly have doubts. But you push these doubts deep down, where they cannot show on your face or affect your performance. Doubt is a form of weakness, and weakness is unacceptable in a samurai. The training continues for 2 more hours. After kata comes kumitachi, free sparring with wooden swords. Though free, is perhaps misleading since there are strict rules about legal targets and prohibited techniques. Then archery practice, then seated meditation in the cold courtyard, then finally, instruction in military tactics and strategy, essentially a lecture where Yamamoto-sensei describes battle formations and tactical principles from wars that ended before you were born. By the time training concludes, the sun is well up and you are exhausted. Your muscles ache, your hands are blistered where your grip on the bakken rubbed the skin raw, and your stomach is growling with hunger. But you cannot show any of this. You bow deeply to Yamamoto-sensei, maintaining the bow for the prescribed length of time, not so short that it seems perfunctory, not so long that it seems sycophantic. Then you bow to your training partners. Then you carefully return your wooden sword to its proper place on the rack. Only then are you dismissed to break your fast. The meal is taken in a large communal dining hall, a long wooden building with rows of low tables. The lower-ranking samurai like yourself sit at the back, while the senior retainers occupy the tables near the front, closest to the place of honor. This seating arrangement is not explicitly enforced. There are no assigned seats, but everyone knows their place. To sit above your station would be an act of extraordinary arrogance. You kneel at a table with several other samurai of similar rank. The meal is already laid out, a bowl of rice, a small portion of miso soup, a few pieces of pickled vegetables, occasionally a tiny piece of fish. This is breakfast for a samurai. It is not generous. It is not particularly nourishing. But it is more than most commoners eat, and you are expected to be grateful for it. The rice is coarse and slightly gritty, cheaper quality than what the senior retainers receive, but still rice, the foundation of every meal. You eat slowly, methodically, chewing each mouthful thoroughly. This is partly because it aids digestion, but also because it makes the meal last longer, provides a brief respite from the demands of the day. No one speaks during the meal. Conversation while eating is considered undignified, too closely associated with the sensual pleasure of food. Samurai are supposed to eat merely to maintain their strength, not for enjoyment. You are supposed to be able to eat the simplest, plainest fare without complaint, to be equally content with a feast or with a handful of cold rice. The reality, of course, is that you are always slightly hungry. Your stipend of 200 koku of rice per year sounds substantial, It is, in fact, enough to feed roughly 200 people for a year. But you do not receive actual rice. You receive a credit, an amount recorded in the clan's ledgers, from which various deductions are made. There are taxes to the shogunate, fees for your position, costs for your equipment and clothing, contributions to various clan expenses. By the time all these deductions are made, what remains is barely enough to support yourself, let alone a household. This is a source of constant anxiety. You are supposed to marry to produce sons who will carry on your family line and serve the clan. But marriage requires resources. A wife must be fed, housed, clothed. Children even more so. The omiai marriage arrangements for samurai involve dowries, ceremonies, elaborate gift exchanges, all of which cost money you do not have. You are 26 years old and still unmarried. This is beginning to become a problem. Your parents, your father long retired from active service, your mother managing the household, have been making increasingly pointed comments about your duty to continue the family line. They have proposed several potential matches, daughters of other samurai families of similar rank. But each proposal falls through when the practical details are discussed, when the other family's representatives tactfully inquire about your financial situation and realize that you can barely support yourself, let alone take on additional dependents. This is humiliating, deeply humiliating. A samurai is supposed to be able to provide for his household, to maintain the dignity and status appropriate to his rank. Your inability to do so marks you as a failure, as someone who has not lived up to the expectations of your class. But what can you do? Your stipend is fixed, determined by your position and your family's historical rank within the clan. You cannot increase it through hard work or exceptional performance. The clan's bureaucracy does not function that way. Promotions are rare, determined more by seniority and family connections than by merit. You could theoretically take on some side work. Many samurai do, teaching at small private schools, serving as scribes or accountants, but such work is looked down upon, seen as beneath the dignity of the warrior class. So you remain trapped, unable to move forward, unable to change your circumstances, simply enduring day after day of this strange half-life where you are theoretically a member of the elite but practically struggling with problems that would be more expected of a poor commoner. You finish your rice and soup, bow to the table, and rise to leave. The morning meal is over. Now comes the real work of the day. Your primary duty is not as a warrior, but as a bureaucrat. You serve in the clan's tax office, one of dozens of samurai assigned to manage the complex system by which the Matsudaira domain extracts revenue from its farmers, merchants, and artisans. The tax office is located in one of the administrative buildings within the castle compound, a two-story wooden structure with rows of small rooms where samurai sit at low desks, writing endlessly in ledgers, calculating figures, drafting reports. The building smells of ink, paper, and mold, the mold an inevitable consequence of Japan's humid climate and the vast quantity of documents stored in every available space. Your desk is in a room with 5 other samurai of similar rank. The room is small, cramped, with barely enough space for the 6 desks and the shelves of ledgers that line the walls. In winter, it is freezing. In summer, suffocatingly hot. There is one small window which provides minimal light and less ventilation. You kneel at your desk and begin reviewing the documents that have accumulated since yesterday. There are reports from village headmen about crop yields, petitions from farmers requesting tax reductions due to flood damage, complaints from merchants about the fees charged at the domain's border checkpoints. Every piece of paper requires action, a note to be made, a calculation to be verified, a response to be drafted for a superior's approval. This is not work that requires a warrior's skills. A literate merchant or even a clever farmer could do it just as well, probably better. But the Tokugawa system insists that all administrative positions be filled by samurai. This serves multiple purposes. It provides employment for the warrior class in an age of peace. It ensures that power remains in the hands of those loyal to the existing order. And it reinforces the ideology that samurai are naturally suited to rule, that their superior education and character make them ideal administrators. Whether this ideology reflects reality is questionable. The samurai working in this tax office are not particularly superior in character or ability. They are simply men who were born into samurai families, who received education because their class required it, who hold these positions because no one else is allowed to. You dip your brush in ink and begin writing a response to one of the farmer's petitions. Your calligraphy must be perfect. Every character must be formed with proper stroke order, proper balance, proper aesthetic quality. A samurai's handwriting reflects on his education and refinement. Sloppy writing is as shameful as poor swordsmanship. The petition is from a village in the western part of the domain. The headman reports that a typhoon damaged the rice paddies, and he respectfully requests a reduction in the village's tax obligation for the year. Such requests are common and are evaluated based on established procedures. You must verify the claim by checking reports from the clan's agricultural inspectors. Then calculate what reduction, if any, is warranted. Then draft a response in the appropriate formal language. This sounds straightforward. In practice, it is not. The tax system is enormously complex, with different rates for different types of land, various exemptions in special cases, elaborate formulas for calculating assessments based on crop yields. Moreover, every decision has implications. If you recommend too large a reduction, you risk appearing soft, lenient, insufficiently vigilant in protecting the clan's revenue. If you recommend too small a reduction, you risk appearing heartless, insensitive to the farmer's genuine hardship. The correct approach is to recommend something precisely in the middle, something that cannot be criticized from either direction. This is not about justice or fairness. It is about avoiding blame, avoiding attention, ensuring that when your superior reviews your work, he has no cause to single you out for criticism. You work steadily through the morning, one document after another. Around you, the other samurai do the same, all of you kneeling at your desks in silence except for the scratch of brushes on paper and the occasional rustle of documents. No one speaks unless absolutely necessary. Conversation would be seen as shirking duty, as valuing social interaction over the serious work of administration. The silence is oppressive. Hour after hour of it, day after day, year after year. You have been working in this office for 4 years now, ever since completing your formal education at age 22. 4 years of kneeling at this desk, writing in these ledgers, processing these endless documents. How many more years will you do this? 10? 20? 30? Will you still be here when you are old, when your back is permanently bent from kneeling, when your eyesight has failed from years of reading by inadequate light? These thoughts are dangerous. They lead nowhere good. You push them away and focus on the document in front of you. At midday, there is a brief break for lunch. Another simple meal of rice and soup, taken quickly and in silence. Then back to the office, back to the desk, back to the documents. The afternoon brings a different sort of task. You are summoned to the office of Saito-sama, one of the senior retainers responsible for overseeing the tax bureau. Saito-sama is a man in his 50s, born into a high-ranking family, the sort of samurai who will never have to worry about money or status. His office is spacious, well-lit, furnished with fine tatami mats and elegant scroll paintings. You kneel in the prescribed position, back straight, hands on thighs, and wait for him to acknowledge you. He does not look up from the document he is reading. This is a deliberate display of status. He is reminding you that your time is less valuable than his, that you exist to serve at his convenience. Finally, after what feels like an eternity but is probably only a few minutes, he sets down the document and regards you with an expression of mild distaste, as if you are something unpleasant he has discovered on the bottom of his sandal. Tanaka, he says. Not Tanaka-san, not even Tanaka-kun, just the bare surname. Another subtle reminder of your inferior position. Yes, Saito-sama, you respond, bowing low. The report you submitted yesterday regarding the Yamada village assessment. I have concerns. Your stomach clenches. A concern from a senior retainer is never trivial. It is a formal criticism, a mark against your record, a suggestion that you have failed in your duty. I am deeply sorry, Saito-sama. How may I correct my error? Your calculation of the flood damage appears generous. Perhaps too generous. I wonder if you have been sufficiently rigorous in verifying the headman's claims. This is infuriating. You spent hours on that calculation, carefully reviewing all available documentation, applying the standard formulas. But you cannot say this. You cannot defend yourself. To do so would be to suggest that Saito-sama's criticism is unfounded, which would be an unforgivable act of insubordination. I apologize for my insufficient rigor, Saito-sama. I will review the calculation again. See that you do. We cannot allow ourselves to be deceived by exaggerated claims of hardship. Farmers are naturally inclined to overstate their problems in hopes of reducing their obligations. It is our duty to be skeptical, to protect the clan's interests. Yes, Saito-sama. I understand completely. You may go. You bow low, lower than strictly necessary, as an additional display of deference, and back out of the office. Only when you are safely in the corridor do you allow yourself to feel the anger and frustration that has been building during this encounter. Saito-sama's criticism is unjust. Your calculation was sound. But that is irrelevant. He needed to criticize someone to demonstrate his authority, to remind the lower-ranking samurai that he is watching them. You were simply the convenient target. This is how the system functions. The junior samurai live in constant fear of criticism from their superiors. The superiors maintain their status by doling out criticism, by keeping their subordinates anxious and off balance. Everyone understands that much of this criticism is arbitrary, unrelated to actual performance. But everyone must pretend otherwise, must treat each criticism as legitimate and deserved. You return to your desk and pull out the Yamada village file. You will spend the rest of the afternoon recalculating figures that you know are already correct, making tiny adjustments that change nothing substantial. Also that you can resubmit a slightly different report that Saito-sama can approve, allowing everyone to maintain the fiction that his criticism was valid and your work has been improved. This is what being a samurai means in the year 1650. Not honor, not glory, but navigating the petty bureaucratic hierarchies of a peacetime domain, trying to avoid criticism, trying to maintain your position and status in a system where genuine advancement is nearly impossible. The afternoon wears on. The light coming through the small window gradually shifts and fades. Your hand cramps from hours of holding the brush. Your back aches from kneeling. Your mind feels numb from the endless repetition of calculations and formal phrases. Finally, as the sun begins to set, the day's official duties come to an end. You carefully organize your desk, ensuring that all documents are properly filed, all brushes cleaned, all inkstones covered. Even this must be done correctly. A messy desk would suggest a disordered mind, a lack of discipline. You leave the administrative building and step out into the castle compound. The evening air is cold and crisp. Lamps are being lit throughout the compound, their warm glow a pleasant contrast to the gathering darkness. For a moment, you allow yourself to simply stand and breathe, to feel the relief of having survived another day without serious incident. But you cannot linger. There are still obligations to fulfill. Evening training is not mandatory like the morning session, but attending is expected. Those who skip it regularly are noticed, whispered about, marked as lacking in dedication. So you make your way back to your quarters, change into training clothes, and head to the dojo, a dedicated training hall separate from the morning practice ground. Here, samurai can practice their martial skills in a more controlled environment, working on advanced techniques, receiving individual instruction from senior practitioners. The dojo is a beautiful building, probably the most aesthetically refined space in the entire compound. The floor is polished wood, maintained with obsessive care. The walls are bare except for calligraphy scrolls displaying the principles of Bushido. At the front of the hall hangs a small shrine to Hachiman, the god of war and protector of warriors. There are perhaps a dozen samurai present for evening training. Some are practicing ka. Others are engaged in intense sparring. A few are simply sitting in meditation. The atmosphere is more relaxed than the morning training. There is no instructor overseeing everything, no formal structure. But the dedication is no less real. These are samurai who genuinely care about their martial skills, who train not because they must, but because they believe in the warrior ideal. You select a practice sword and begin working through kata by yourself. The movements are familiar, performed so many thousands of times that your body executes them almost automatically. This frees your mind to wander, to process the events of the day. You think about Saito-sama's criticism, about the endless documents waiting on your desk tomorrow, about the marriage proposals that keep falling through, about your parents' disappointed faces, about the gap between the samurai ideal presented in the old stories and the mundane reality of your actual life. In the stories, samurai are heroes. They display perfect loyalty, perfect courage, perfect honor. They face death without fear. They serve their lords with unwavering devotion. They live according to the principles of Bushido: righteousness, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. But what does Bushido mean in practice, in an age of peace, when you spend your days pushing papers and navigating office politics? How do you display courage when there are no battles to fight? How do you show unwavering loyalty when your lord is a distant figure you rarely see, and your immediate superiors are petty bureaucrats like Saito-sama? The old teachers say that Bushido is not about dramatic gestures in extreme situations. It is about maintaining proper behavior in ordinary life. It is about discipline in small things. Writing every character with perfect form. Keeping your living space clean and orderly. Treating everyone, from the highest lord to the lowest servant, with appropriate respect. Never showing anger, frustration, or weakness. This sounds wise, and perhaps it is. But it also feels like a way of making the samurai class relevant in an age when they no longer serve their original purpose. If we cannot be warriors, if our martial skills have no practical application, then we will define Bushido as something that can be demonstrated through desk work and social etiquette. You execute a particularly difficult kata sequence, your sword moving through a series of cuts and parries so quickly they blur together. The physical exertion is satisfying, a release of the tension that has been building all day. For these few moments, you are not a frustrated bureaucrat. You are a swordsman, your body and weapon moving as one, perfectly balanced, perfectly controlled. This is the closest you ever come to feeling like the samurai of legend. And even this is just practice, just a performance with no real stakes, no real danger. Evening training concludes after about an hour. You bow to the shrine, bow to the other practitioners, carefully return your equipment to its proper place. Then you head to the communal bathhouse. The bathhouse is one of the few pleasures available to the lower-ranking samurai. It is a large wooden building with a spacious bath fed by heated water from the compound's well system. After a long day of training and work, sinking into the hot water is almost transcendent. The bath is segregated by rank. The senior retainers have their own bathing time, when the water is hottest and cleanest. The lower-ranking samurai bathe later, in water that is cooler and already used. But even this second-class bathing experience is far superior to what most commoners have access to. You wash thoroughly outside the bath first. This is mandatory protocol. You cannot enter the communal tub while still dirty. Then you step into the hot water and find a spot along the edge. The heat seeps into your muscles, easing the day's accumulated tension. Around you, other samurai do the same, their faces relaxing for perhaps the first time since morning. Here, finally, some quiet conversation is permitted. Nothing too personal or emotional, that would be unseemly. But the usual small talk about training, about minor administrative matters, about the weather. One samurai mentions that the daimyo lord will be traveling to Edo, the shogun's capital, next month for his required period of attendance at the shogun's court. This means the senior retainers will accompany him, which means some shuffling of responsibilities among those who remain behind. Perhaps there will be opportunities for advancement, someone suggests quietly. This sparks a brief discussion. When positions open up temporarily, sometimes lower-ranking samurai are given additional responsibilities. If they perform well, this can lead to permanent promotion. Of course, such opportunities are rare and highly competitive. For every samurai who advances, dozens remain stuck at their current rank. You listen to this conversation but do not participate. You have learned not to hope too much. Hope is dangerous. It makes disappointment more painful. After perhaps 20 minutes in the bath, you climb out, dry yourself, and dress in a clean yukata robe. The evening meal will be served soon in the dining hall. But first, you want to stop by your quarters briefly. Your room looks exactly as you left it this morning. Small, sparse, impeccably clean. You light a small lamp and sit for a moment, simply appreciating the brief solitude before the next obligation. On the shelf beside your futon is a small wooden box. You open it and remove its contents, a few letters from your parents, a small bronze mirror that belonged to your grandfather, and a book, a collection of poetry from the Heian period, written centuries ago when the imperial court in Kyoto was the center of Japanese culture. You are not supposed to care about poetry. It is associated with the refined courtiers of the past, not with the martial samurai. But you love these poems. Their delicate observations of natural beauty, their meditation on impermanence and loss, their subtle emotional depth, they speak to something in you that the harsh teachings of Bushido cannot reach. You open the book to a favorite poem, written by a court lady nearly 600 years ago. This world of ours, to what shall I compare it? To the white wake behind a boat that has rowed away at dawn. You read these lines and feel something shift in your chest. The poem captures perfectly what you struggle to express, the sense that everything is fleeting, that even as you live this life, it is already disappearing like foam on water. Your days in the tax office, your training in the dojo, your frustrated hopes for marriage and advancement, all of it will fade, will be forgotten, will leave no more trace than the wake of a boat. This should be depressing. But somehow it is comforting. If everything is impermanent, then your failures do not matter quite so much. Your humiliation by Saito-sama today will be forgotten tomorrow. The gap between your actual life and the samurai ideal, this too will pass. You sit with a poem for a few minutes, letting its quiet wisdom settle into your mind. Then you carefully close the book, return it to its box, and prepare for the evening meal. Dinner is much like breakfast. Rice, soup, pickled vegetables, occasionally a small portion of fish. You eat in silence at your designated place in the dining hall. The meal is over quickly. After dinner comes the only truly free time in the day. Most samurai return to their quarters to read, write letters, practice calligraphy, or simply rest. Some gather in small groups for go or shogi, strategic board games that are considered appropriately intellectual pastimes for the warrior class. You return to your room and spend some time writing a letter to your parents. It is difficult to know what to say. You do not want to worry them by mentioning your problems at work or your continuing failure to find a suitable marriage match. But you also cannot bring yourself to write cheerful lies about how well everything is going. So you settle for neutral observations about the weather, about minor events in the castle compound, about nothing of any real significance. As you write, you become aware of sounds from the adjacent rooms. The thin paper walls provide almost no privacy. You can hear everything your neighbors do. Conversations, arguments, the sounds of intimate activity when samurai manage to sneak women into the barracks despite the official prohibitions. You try to ignore these sounds to focus on your letter, but they are a constant reminder of how little solitude or privacy you have. After completing the letter, you prepare for bed. Tomorrow will be the same as today. Morning training at dawn. A simple breakfast. Hours at your desk in the tax office. More training in the evening. Another sparse meal. A few quiet moments alone before sleep. This is your life as a samurai in the year 1650. Day after day, month after month, year after year. The same routine, the same pressures, the same slow grinding away of hope and spirit. And yet you cannot leave, cannot abandon this life. To leave the samurai class would be unthinkable, impossible. Where would you go? What would you do? You have no skills except those appropriate to a samurai. You have no resources, no connections outside this world. And even if you could leave, even if you could somehow become a merchant or a farmer, the shame would destroy your family. Your father would be required to commit seppuku to atone for your disgrace. Your family name would be forever tarnished. So you are trapped. Not by chains or walls, but by expectations, by honor, by the elaborate structure of obligations and duties that define samurai existence. You lie down on your futon and stare at the ceiling in the darkness. Despite your exhaustion, sleep does not come easily. Your mind keeps turning over the events of the day, worrying about tomorrow's tasks, anxiously rehearsing conversations you might need to have with superiors. Eventually, you do sleep. A shallow, restless sleep, troubled by vague dreams of drowning in an ocean of paper documents, of failing some crucial test you did not know you would face. And then it is morning again. 4 o'clock. The cold darkness. The thin futon. The weight of obligations settling on you before you have even fully woken. Another day begins. The days blend together. Morning training. Office work. Evening practice. Occasional inspections where senior retainers scrutinize every aspect of your appearance and behavior. Periodic ceremonies marking various clan events. The routine varies only slightly from season to season. Winter is the hardest time. The cold is relentless, seeping through the thin walls of your quarters, making morning training an exercise in endurance as you practice sword cuts with hands so cold you can barely feel the wooden handle. The tax office is barely warmer. You write with fingers stiff and clumsy, constantly stopping to warm them over the small charcoal brazier. Spring brings some relief. The cherry blossoms bloom in the castle compound, their delicate pink flowers a welcome splash of beauty in the austere environment. There is even a formal blossom viewing ceremony, where the samurai gather in the garden to appreciate the flowers while drinking modest amounts of sake. This is one of the few occasions when conversation flows relatively freely, when the strict hierarchies relax slightly, when you can speak with samurai from other divisions and learn what is happening in other parts of the domain. It is at one of these cherry blossom viewings, in the spring of your 27th year, that you first hear serious rumors about problems in the domain's finances. The Matsudaira clan is running a deficit. The annual tribute that must be paid to the shogunate keeps increasing, but tax revenues remain flat. Something will have to change. At first, this seems like just another administrative problem, another topic for the senior retainers to worry about. But gradually, the implications become clear. If revenues must increase, that means finding new sources of taxation or increasing rates on existing sources. Either way, it means more work for the tax office. It means pressure from above to extract more from farmers who are already struggling. It means difficult decisions about which villages can afford to pay more and which are genuinely at the edge of survival. Sure enough, within a few months, new directives arrive from the senior administrators. All tax assessments must be reviewed. A comprehensive survey of agricultural land must be conducted. New regulations regarding merchant fees must be drafted and implemented. Your workload doubles, then triples. You arrive at the office before dawn and leave long after dark. Your desk is perpetually buried under documents. The pressure from superiors intensifies. Saito-sama and others conduct frequent reviews of your work, finding fault with minor details, demanding revisions and recalculations. The strain is immense. You are not alone in feeling it. All the junior samurai in the tax office are struggling under the increased burden. Some begin to show signs of breaking. One samurai, a man a few years younger than you named Watanabe, makes an error in a significant calculation, a genuine mistake, not the sort of tiny imperfection that usually provokes criticism. The error results in a village being overassessed by a substantial amount. When the mistake is discovered, Watanabe is called before the senior retainers for formal rebuke. You do not witness this meeting, but you hear about it afterward. Watanabe was forced to kneel for over an hour, while various senior retainers took turns criticizing him. His incompetence, his carelessness, his failure to uphold the standards expected of a samurai. By the time the meeting ended, Watanabe was shaking, barely able to stand. 2 days later, Watanabe commits seppuku. He does it properly, following all the correct protocols. He writes a death poem. He notifies his immediate superior of his intention. He arranges for another samurai to serve as his kaishakunin, the person who will perform the final beheading that ends the agony of disembowelment. He dresses in formal white robes, sits in a prescribed position, and uses his wakizashi to cut open his own stomach. His death is officially recorded as atonement for his error. In reality, everyone knows it was shame, the unbearable weight of public humiliation, the knowledge that he had failed to meet expectations, the awareness that his mistake would be remembered and spoken about, that he had brought dishonor upon himself and his family. You attend his funeral. It is a small ceremony, attended only by the samurai from his office division and a few others. His body is cremated according to Buddhist rites. His ashes are returned to his family. His name is removed from the duty rosters. And then everyone returns to work. There are still documents to process, calculations to make, reports to write. Watanabe's desk is cleared out and reassigned to a new samurai. Within a week, it is as if he never existed. But you cannot forget, cannot stop thinking about him. Watanabe was a competent samurai, perhaps more skilled than you in some areas. His error was honest, not a result of laziness or negligence. It could have happened to anyone. It could have happened to you. And his response, ritual suicide, was treated as honorable, even admirable. He had atoned for his failure in the most complete way possible. This is what Bushido requires: absolute accountability, absolute willingness to accept the ultimate consequence for one's errors. But is this really honor? Or is it something darker, a system that demands perfection from imperfect humans, that offers death as the only acceptable response to failure, that values the appearance of excellence over the reality of human limitation? These questions haunt you, but you cannot speak them aloud. To question the Bushido code, to suggest that perhaps ritual suicide for administrative errors is barbaric rather than honorable, this would be heresy, a fundamental rejection of the values that define samurai existence. So you keep these thoughts to yourself and work even more carefully, double-checking every calculation, reviewing every document multiple times before submitting it. The fear of making a mistake like Watanabe's becomes a constant presence, a background anxiety that colors everything you do. The summer arrives, bringing oppressive heat and humidity. The tax office becomes almost unbearable, hot, airless, thick with the smell of sweat and molding paper. But the work does not slow down. If anything, it intensifies as the agricultural survey progresses and harvest assessments must be calculated. You develop a persistent headache that never quite goes away. Your sleep, never good, becomes even more disturbed. You wake frequently during the night, your mind immediately jumping to worries about work, about money, about the 1,000 obligations and pressures that weigh upon you. In late summer, you are informed that you will be part of a team conducting an inspection tour of villages in the northern part of the domain. This is simultaneously an honor. You have been selected for an important task that will bring you into direct contact with senior administrators, and a burden. The tour will last for 2 weeks, during which you will be traveling in harsh conditions, working longer hours than usual, and under intense scrutiny from your superiors. The inspection team consists of 8 samurai, 2 senior administrators who will lead the team, and 6 junior samurai like yourself who will do the actual work of surveying land, verifying crop yields, and interviewing village headmen. You travel on horseback through mountain roads that are little more than trails, staying in simple lodgings in each village, working from dawn until well after dark. This is your first extended time outside the castle compound in years. Your first real encounter with the people whose lives are shaped by the documents you process in your office. And what you see disturbs you profoundly. The villages are poor, desperately poor. The farmers live in small wooden huts with dirt floors. Their clothes are patched and worn. Their faces are marked by hardship and premature aging. They work from sunrise to sunset in the rice paddies, bent over in back-breaking labor, producing the rice that feeds the domain but barely having enough for themselves. When you arrive in each village, the headman greets your party with deep bows and nervous courtesy. The villagers are required to provide accommodation and food for the inspection team, an additional burden on top of their regular tax obligations. You eat simple meals of rice and vegetables while watching children peek through doorways, their eyes wide with curiosity and perhaps hunger. The senior administrators conduct the interviews with the village headman, asking detailed questions about land area, crop yields, household numbers. You take notes, recording every answer for later verification. The headmen are careful in their responses, knowing that any attempt to understate their resources will be seen as tax evasion, but also knowing that overstating their situation will result in impossibly high tax obligations. It is a delicate dance, this negotiation between the domain's representatives and the village leaders. Both sides understand the stakes. The domain needs revenue to maintain its operations, to pay its stipends to samurai families, to fulfill its obligations to the shogunate. The villages need to retain enough rice to feed their people, to save seed for next year's planting, to have some small buffer against inevitable disasters like floods or crop failures. In theory, the system should balance these needs. In practice, you quickly realize it does nothing of the sort. The domain's financial pressures always take priority. When in doubt, the assessment goes higher. The villages must bear the burden. One evening, after a particularly long day of surveying, you find yourself alone with one of the village headmen, an old man with a deeply lined face and missing several teeth. He approaches you quietly as you are reviewing your notes outside the village head house. "Honored samurai," he says, bowing low. "May this humble person speak with you for a moment?" You nod, surprised and a bit uncomfortable. Direct communication between samurai and commoners is discouraged outside of official interactions. The old man glances around to ensure no one else is listening, then continues in a low voice. "I have served as headman of this village for 23 years. I've always strived to fulfill our obligations to the domain. But I must speak honestly with you now. The new assessment you have recorded, it is too high. We cannot meet it. If we try, we will have no seed rice for next spring's planting. The village will starve." You look at the old man, at the desperation in his eyes, and feel something twist in your chest. "The assessment is based on the survey data," you say quietly. "The crop yields you reported, the land area measured. The calculations are correct. The calculations may be correct, honored samurai, but the reality." He trails off, seemingly unable to find words adequate to the situation. "I will note your concern in my report," you tell him, though you know this will make no difference. The senior administrators have their orders. The domain needs revenue. Individual villages' hardships are not their primary concern. The old man bows deeply. "Thank you, honored samurai. Thank you for your kindness and listening." There is no hope in his voice, only resignation. That night, you lie awake in your accommodation, a small room in the village head house, listening to the sounds of the village settling into sleep. You think about the documents you process in your office, the neat columns of numbers, the formal language of tax assessments and revenue projections. None of it captures this reality, the actual human cost of each decision, the families that will go hungry, the children who will suffer because of calculations you make with brush and ink in a distant office. Is this what it means to be a samurai? To enforce a system that extracts resources from those least able to provide them? To maintain your own position and status on the backs of farmers who can barely survive? These are dangerous thoughts. Disloyal thoughts. The social order is divinely ordained, according to Buddhist and Confucian teaching. Farmers exist to produce food. Samurai exist to rule and defend. Merchants exist to facilitate commerce. Everyone has their place, their role, their duty. To question this is to question the fundamental structure of society. And yet you cannot shake the image of that old headman's face, the quiet desperation in his voice. The inspection tour continues. Village after village, the same pattern. Poor farmers, high assessments, quiet pleas that cannot be officially acknowledged. By the time you return to the castle compound 2 weeks later, you are exhausted, physically from the hard travel and long working days, emotionally from the weight of what you have witnessed. But there is no time to rest, no opportunity to process these experiences. The documents from the inspection must be compiled into reports. The new assessments must be entered into the domain's tax ledgers. The routine of office work resumes immediately. You try to push down your doubts to focus on your duty. This is what Bushido requires. Fulfilling your obligations regardless of personal feelings, serving your lord regardless of personal cost. A samurai does not question. A samurai simply acts according to his station and role. But the doubts remain, growing quietly in the back of your mind like weeds in an untended garden. Autumn arrives. The rice harvest is completed throughout the domain, and the actual collection of taxes begins. This is always a tense time. The assessments have been made, the obligations are clear, but the reality of collecting often reveals problems that were not apparent in the planning stage. Some villages cannot meet their obligations. Crop yields were lower than projected. Disasters occurred, a fire, a flood, an infestation of insects. The headmen come to the castle to petition for reductions, bringing whatever evidence they can muster to support their cases. You are assigned to review these petitions to make recommendations about which should be granted and which denied. It is soul-crushing work. You know that many of these petitions are genuine, that the hardships described are real. But you also know that the domain has its own obligations, its own financial pressures. You cannot grant every request, so you make decisions. This village receives a modest reduction. That one is denied. This one is granted an extension to pay later. Each decision is justified by reference to the domain's policies and procedures, to precedent and established formulas. But behind each decision is a village full of people whose lives will be shaped by what you decide. Will they have enough to eat this winter? Will they be able to plant next spring's crop? Will they survive? These questions haunt your dreams. You dream of drowning in rice, mountains of rice that you must count and record and redistribute, rice that pours over you in an endless stream until you cannot breathe. You dream of the old village headman, his face becoming the face of your father, then your grandfather, then your own face reflected in a dark pool. One morning, after a particularly disturbed night, you arrive at morning training to find Yamamoto-sensei waiting with an unusual expression, something that might be concern, though his weathered face rarely shows clear emotion. "Tanaka," he says quietly. "A word." You approach and bow. He leads you to a corner of the training ground, away from the other samurai who are beginning to arrive for practice. "You seem troubled," he says. Not a question. An observation. You do not know how to respond. To admit to being troubled seems like admitting weakness. But Yamamoto-sensei is not asking out of idle curiosity. He is your teacher, responsible in some way for your development as a samurai. "I am managing my duties, sensei," you say carefully. "That is not what I asked." His eyes, sharp despite his age, hold yours. "Something is weighing on your spirit." I have seen this before in young samurai. The gap between the warrior ideal and the reality of our duties in this peaceful age. The fact that he acknowledges this gap, that he gives voice to something you have been struggling with privately, is almost shocking. Teachers are supposed to reinforce the ideals, not question them. You hesitate, then decide to risk honesty. "I recently completed an inspection tour of the northern villages. I saw the conditions in which the farmers live, and I am troubled by my role in extracting taxes from people who have so little." Yamamoto-sensei nods slowly. This is an old problem. Perhaps the oldest problem for samurai who think carefully about what they do. He is silent for a moment, gazing out at the training ground as the other samurai begin their morning exercises. "When I was young," he says finally, "I fought in the wars. I killed men in battle. I saw terrible things, but I also had a clear sense of purpose. I was a warrior doing what warriors do, fighting to protect my lord, defending his domain against enemies. The morality was simple, even when the reality was horrifying." He pauses. "Now, in this age of peace, the morality is more complex. We samurai must find our purpose not in warfare but in administration, in maintaining order, in preserving the structures of society. This is also necessary work. But it is harder work in some ways because the rightness of it is less clear." You wait for him to continue, sensing that he has more to say. "I cannot tell you how to resolve this tension, Tanaka. Each samurai must find his own way. Some focus on the duties themselves, performing each task with perfection regardless of larger questions. Some find meaning in the ideals of Bushido, in cultivating their character and spirit. Some simply endure, accepting that life involves moral complexity and ambiguity." He turns to look at you directly. "What I can tell you is this: doubts and questions are not weakness. They are signs that you are thinking seriously about your life and duties. The danger comes not from having such thoughts, but from allowing them to paralyze you or turn you away from your obligations." "Thank you, sensei," you say, bowing deeply. His words do not resolve your doubts, but they provide a kind of permission to have them, an acknowledgement that you are not alone in your struggle. "Now," he says, his tone becoming more brisk, "let us train. Whatever else is true, a samurai must maintain his skills. That much is certain. You take your place among the other samurai, and begin the familiar routine of morning practice. The physical discipline is centering, grounding. For these 2 hours, there is only the sword, the body, the movement. The moral complexities fade into the background. This, perhaps, is part of Bushido's purpose. Not to answer life's difficult questions, but to provide a structure, a discipline, a practice that keeps you functional even when answers are not available. Winter returns. Your 28th year begins much like your 27th ended. Cold mornings, endless paperwork, evening training, sparse meals, restless sleep. The routine is so established now that you move through it almost automatically, your mind often elsewhere, even as your body performs its designated functions. But in the 3rd month of the new year, something changes. A messenger arrives from Edo, the shogun's capital, bringing news that reverberates through the castle compound like a stone dropped into still water. The Matsudaira clan has been chosen to provide an honor guard for a diplomatic mission to Korea. This is a significant assignment, one that brings prestige to the domain and requires selecting the best samurai to represent the clan. More importantly, it means that for the first time in your life, there is a possibility, however slim, of leaving the narrow confines of domain service, of seeing something beyond the castle compound and the local villages. The selection process is announced. Any samurai who wishes to be considered for the mission may submit their name. Of course, only those with excellent records, strong recommendations from superiors, and demonstrated skill in martial arts and etiquette will actually be chosen. The mission will last approximately 6 months, and those selected will receive an additional stipend to cover expenses and compensate for the dangers of travel. You think about it for several days. Part of you desperately wants to apply. The chance to see Korea, to experience something beyond the daily grind of tax administration, to actually serve in a role that resembles the samurai ideal of service and protection, all of this appeals to you enormously. But another part is more cautious. You have no particular connections to the senior retainers who will make the selection. Your record, while solid, is not exceptional. And what if you are selected? Who will handle your duties in the tax office? What if you make some error during the mission, something that brings shame not just upon yourself, but upon the entire domain? The fear of failure, you realize, has become so deeply ingrained that it now prevents you from even attempting to change your situation. This recognition is both clarifying and depressing. You decide to speak with your father. He's older now, in his 60s, long retired from active service but still sharp in mind. You visit him one evening at the modest house where he lives with your mother, located in the outer section of the castle town where retired samurai and their families reside. Your father receives you with a formal courtesy that characterizes your relationship. You are his son, but you are also a fellow samurai, and the protocols must be observed. You drink tea together in silence for a while before you raise the subject of the diplomatic mission. I am considering whether to submit my name for selection, you tell him. Your father considers this, his face thoughtful. What are your chances of being chosen? Not high, you admit. I have no special connections. My service record is adequate but not distinguished. Then why apply? It is a fair question. Why expose yourself to the disappointment of rejection? Why call attention to yourself when remaining quietly in your current position is safer? Because, you say slowly, working out your thoughts as you speak, I find myself wondering if there is more to being a samurai than what I am currently doing. I do not mean to disparage my duties. I know they are necessary. But I sometimes think that I am merely going through the motions, that I have lost sight of any larger purpose. Your father is silent for a long moment. Then he says, I felt this way myself at your age. I too serve in administrative roles, though in my time there was more talk of warfare, more sense that we might actually be called to fight. But it never happened. And I spent my entire career doing paperwork, much like you. He pauses. I do not know if I can say whether this is good or bad. I fulfilled my duty. I supported my family. I maintained the family honor. Is that enough? Perhaps. Perhaps not. I am too old now to answer such questions with certainty. He looks at you with something that might be sympathy. If you wish to apply for this mission, you should do so. The worst that can happen is that you are not selected, in which case you will be no worse off than you are now. and there is a small chance you might be chosen, in which case you will have an experience that few samurai of our generation have been granted. You bow, grateful for his perspective. That evening, you return to your quarters and draft a formal letter applying for consideration. You list your qualifications, your years of service, your training. You have the letter reviewed by another samurai who is skilled in formal correspondence, making sure that the phrasing and tone are appropriate. Then you submit it to the appropriate office. And then you wait. The wait is agonizing. Weeks pass with no word. The selection process is opaque. You do not know how many samurai have applied, who is reviewing the applications, what criteria are being used. You try to focus on your regular duties, but the uncertainty gnaws at you. Finally, 2 months after submitting your application, you are summoned to meet with one of the senior retainers involved in the selection process. Your heart pounds as you make your way to his office. This could mean anything: selection, rejection, or simply a request for additional information. The senior retainer, Matsumoto-sama, receives you in his office. He is a man in his late 50s, one of the highest-ranking administrators in the domain, known for his meticulous attention to detail and his high standards. Tanaka Masayuki, he says, looking at a document on his desk, presumably your application. You have served in the tax office for 6 years. Your record shows competent performance with no serious errors. Satisfactory, though not exceptional. You bow. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve the domain, Matsumoto-sama. Why do you wish to join the diplomatic mission? It is a direct question, one that cuts through formalities. You choose your words carefully. I believe it would provide an opportunity to serve the domain in a different capacity, one that would test my abilities and perhaps allow me to better understand what it means to be a samurai in this era. Matsumoto-sama regards you thoughtfully. An honest answer. Many samurai give flowery speeches about honor and duty. You at least acknowledge that this is about personal development as much as service. He is silent for a moment, looking at your application. I will be frank with you, Tanaka. Your chances of selection were not high. We received over 100 applications for 20 positions. Many of the applicants have stronger records, better connections, more distinguished family backgrounds. Your heart sinks. This is clearly leading to a rejection. However, Matsumoto-sama continues, one of the factors we must consider is whether the samurai we select will be able to endure the rigors of the journey and represent the domain appropriately in a foreign land. Your record shows steady performance under pressure. You have never been involved in any scandal or controversy. Your martial skills, while not exceptional, are solid. And your recent work on the agricultural inspection tour demonstrated an ability to work effectively in difficult field conditions. He pauses. We have decided to include you among those selected for the mission. For a moment, you are not sure you heard correctly. Selected? You? I. You struggle to find words. I am deeply honored, Matsumoto-sama. I will strive to serve the domain well. See that you do, he says. The mission departs in 2 months. During that time, you will undergo specialized training in diplomatic protocol, Korean language basics, and various other necessary skills. Your duties in the tax office will be reassigned. You are dismissed. You bow low, extremely low, lower than protocol strictly requires, and back out of the office. Only when you are safely in the corridor do you allow yourself to feel the full impact of what has just happened. You have been selected. Out of 100 applicants, you are one of 20. You will travel to Korea, will see a foreign land, will serve in a role that resembles the samurai ideal far more than shuffling papers in a tax office. For the first time in years, you feel something that might be hope. The next 2 months pass in a blur of preparation. The specialized training is intensive and demanding. You learn basic Korean phrases, greetings, polite forms of address, common questions. You study Korean history and culture, learning about their kingdom's relationship with Japan, their customs and etiquette. You receive instruction in diplomatic protocol, learning how to conduct yourself in formal meetings with Korean officials. There are also practical preparations. You are fitted for new clothing and armor appropriate for the journey. You receive a better quality katana than you currently carry, one deemed worthy of representing the domain abroad. You participate in extensive training exercises designed to prepare you for the hardships of travel, long marches with full gear, navigating difficult terrain, maintaining discipline under challenging conditions. The 20 samurais selected for the mission train together, gradually forming into a cohesive unit. Most are, like you, mid-level samurai in their 20s and 30s. A few are older veterans chosen for their experience. You begin to know your companions, though always maintaining proper formality and distance. There is Ishikawa, a skilled swordsman with a dry sense of humor. Nakamura, who speaks Chinese and will serve as an additional interpreter. Endo, quiet and intensely serious, who treats every training exercise as if it were actual combat. The mission is led by Matsudara Nobuyuki, a senior member of the daimyo's family, chosen for his diplomatic skills and his ability to represent the domain at the highest levels. He is accompanied by several other high-ranking samurai who will serve as advisors and negotiators. As the departure date approaches, you realize how much your entire perspective has shifted. The daily concerns that once consumed you, the office politics, the fear of criticism, the worry about money, all seem less important now. You are about to embark on a journey that few samurai of our generation will ever experience. Whatever happens, you will have this. Your parents come to see you off. Your father says little, but you see pride in his eyes, perhaps pride that his son has been chosen for this honor, perhaps something else. Your mother worries about the dangers of travel, the possibility of storms or bandits or foreign treachery. You reassure her that the mission is well guarded, that you will be careful. On the morning of departure, the entire mission assembles in the main courtyard of the castle. The daimyo himself appears to offer a formal blessing and send-off. It is a moment of genuine ceremony, a kind of event that makes you feel, for perhaps the first time, that you are truly part of something larger than yourself. The journey to the coast takes several days. You travel on horseback along the main roads, a long column of samurai and pack animals, attracting attention in every village and town you pass through. People come out to watch, to bow as the procession passes. Children stare wide-eyed at the samurai in their armor and fine clothing. At the port, you board a ship, a large vessel built for ocean travel, far larger than anything you have seen before. The sight of it, resting at anchor in the harbor, sails furled, is both exciting and frightening. You have never been on a ship before. Have never been more than a day's travel from the place where you were born. As the ship sets sail, as the coast of Japan slowly recedes behind you, you stand at the railing and watch your homeland disappear. The feeling is strange, a mixture of exhilaration and melancholy, of anticipation and loss. You are leaving behind everything familiar. The castle compound where you have spent your adult life. The routine that has defined your existence. The narrow world of duty and obligation and petty bureaucratic concerns. Whatever awaits in Korea, whatever experiences you will have in the coming months, you know that you will return changed. You cannot remain the same person after this journey. The question is whether that change will be for better or worse, whether you will find a larger purpose and meaning you have been seeking, or whether you will discover that such meaning does not exist, that a samurai in this age of peace is simply a relic of a bygone era, trying to find relevance in a world that no longer needs warriors. The sea stretches endlessly before you, dark and vast under an overcast sky. The wind fills the sails. The ship creaks and rolls with the waves. And you, Tanaka Masayuki, 28 years old, mid-level samurai in the service of the Matsudaira clan, begin the next chapter of your story. The voyage to Korea takes 5 days. 5 days of constant motion, of the deck rolling beneath your feet, of the smell of salt and tar, and the cramped quarters below deck where the samurai sleep in rows like cargo. Many of your companions suffer from seasickness, unable to keep down the simple meals of rice and dried fish. You manage somewhat better, though you too spend the first day feeling queasy and miserable. On the third day, a storm hits. The sea transforms from merely rough to genuinely frightening, with waves that tower above the ship before crashing down on the deck. The captain orders everyone below, and you huddle in the darkness with your fellow samurai, listening to the timbers groan and crack, wondering if the ship will hold together. This, you think, is closer to the samurai life of old, facing danger, accepting the possibility of death, maintaining composure in the face of genuine fear. And you discover something interesting. You are afraid, certainly, but you're also calm. The training has not been wasted. Your body knows how to remain still, to control your breathing, to prevent panic from taking over. The storm passes. The ship survives, though some cargo is lost overboard and several sailors are injured. When you emerge back on deck, the sea is calm, almost glassy, and the air has a strange clarity that makes every detail seem preternaturally sharp. On the fifth day, land appears on the horizon. Korea? The sight of that foreign shore sends a jolt of excitement through you. You are actually here, actually seeing a place you have only read about in books and reports. The ship docks at Busan, a port city on Korea's southern coast. As you disembark, stepping onto foreign soil for the first time, you are struck by how similar and yet how different everything is. The people look much like Japanese people, wear similar clothing, go about their business in ways that seem familiar. But the language is different, the architecture subtly distinct, the atmosphere somehow other in ways you cannot quite articulate. The Korean officials who meet your delegation are elaborately polite, conducting all interactions through interpreters with careful attention to protocol. The mission is housed in a guest compound, a collection of buildings surrounded by a wall, specifically designated for foreign delegations. It is comfortable, but also clearly designed to keep you separated from the general population. For the next several months, your life falls into a new routine, but a routine utterly different from what you knew in Japan. Your duties involve serving as part of the guard detail for the senior diplomats, maintaining security at the compound, and occasionally accompanying delegations to meetings with Korean officials. The work is not particularly demanding from a physical standpoint, but requires constant vigilance and absolute propriety. You are representing not just yourself, but your entire domain, your entire country. Every action, every word, is scrutinized and judged. A single error could create diplomatic incidents, could bring shame upon the mission. But there is also freedom here that you never experienced in Japan. You are far from the oppressive hierarchy of the castle compound. While formalities must still be observed, the atmosphere is somewhat more relaxed. The samurai on the mission develop a genuine camaraderie, forged through shared experiences of travel and foreign service. In your free time, you are permitted to explore the area around the guest compound. Always in groups, always with an interpreter, but still, you walk through Korean streets, see Korean people going about their lives, observe a culture different from your own. You visit Korean temples, their architecture similar to Japanese Buddhist temples, but with distinct stylistic differences. You try Korean food, which is sometimes spicier than Japanese cuisine, often prepared with different techniques. You hear Korean music, which uses different scales and instruments than Japanese music. All of this is fascinating. But more than the specific details, what strikes you is a larger realization. The world is bigger than you thought. The certainties you grew up with, the assumptions about Japanese superiority and uniqueness, seem less solid when you are actually in another country, seeing that they too have sophisticated culture, skilled craftspeople, complex philosophy, and literature. One evening, you are assigned to guard duty during a formal banquet where Matsudaira Nobuyuki is meeting with Korean officials. You stand at attention in the corridor outside the banquet hall, not part of the actual meeting but responsible for security. Through the paper doors, you can hear muffled conversation, occasional laughter. A Korean guard stands nearby, also on duty. He is roughly your age, dressed in the distinctive armor and uniform of Korean military officials. For a while, you simply stand in parallel, each of you maintaining your assigned positions. Then, during a particularly long lull in the sounds from the banquet hall, the Korean guard speaks. You do not understand the words, but his tone is friendly, conversational. He gestures to himself and says what is clearly his name, Kim Min-jun. You gesture to yourself in return. Tanaka Masayuki. He nods and smiles. Then he makes a gesture as if drinking and pantomimes being bored or tired. You understand, guard duty is tedious, regardless of country. You nod agreement and make a similar gesture. He grins. For the next few minutes, you and Kim Min-jun communicate through gestures and facial expressions, transcending the language barrier through shared human understanding. You're both young men serving in military bureaucratic roles, standing guard at formal functions, bound by rigid protocols, trying to maintain dignity while also being bored out of your minds. It is a small moment, insignificant in the grand scope of the diplomatic mission. But for you, it is revelatory. This Korean guard, he is not fundamentally different from you. His concerns, his daily life, his frustrations and hopes, they are probably not so different from yours. The elaborate ideologies that distinguish us from them, Japanese from Korean, samurai from Korean warriors, all of these seem less significant when you are actually standing next to someone from that other category, recognizing your shared humanity. The banquet concludes. You and Kim Min-jun bow to each other, a gesture of mutual respect before each returns to your respective duties. You never see him again, but you do not forget that brief moment of connection. The diplomatic mission proceeds through its various stages. Meetings are held. Treaties are negotiated. Gifts are exchanged. Elaborate presentations of silk, ceramics, metalwork, texts. You are present for some of these ceremonies, standing at attention in your best armor, embodying the martial dignity of the samurai class. But increasingly, you find yourself questioning what all of this actually means. What is the purpose of these elaborate diplomatic rituals? To maintain peace between the countries, presumably. To facilitate trade and cultural exchange. These are worthy goals. Yet you cannot help noticing that so much of the effort goes into ceremony rather than substance. The endless protocols about who sits where, who speaks first, how gifts should be presented. The careful phrasing of letters and agreements, every word scrutinized for possible insult or improper implication. Is this really necessary? Or is it simply another version of the bureaucratic theater you left behind in Japan? Elaborate procedures that exist primarily to justify the existence of the people who perform them. You have no answers to these questions. You are too junior to be privy to the actual substance of the negotiations. You are simply a guard, a presence, a representative of military capability that everyone hopes will never need to be used. As the months pass, you begin to feel a growing sense of restlessness. The novelty of being in Korea has worn off. The initial excitement of foreign travel has faded. What remains is another kind of routine, different from the one in Japan, but still a routine, still a life of following orders and maintaining appearances. One night, unable to sleep, you sit in the courtyard of the guest compound, looking up at the stars. The sky here is the same sky as in Japan, the same stars and the same patterns. This obvious fact somehow feels profound. You think about the path your life has taken. The years of training, of office work, of striving to embody an ideal that seems increasingly hollow. You think about Watanabe, who killed himself over an administrative error. About the village headman pleading for tax relief. About Yamamoto-sensei acknowledging the gap between warrior ideals and bureaucratic reality. What are you doing here? What is the point of any of this? These questions have been building for years, but here, in this foreign land, away from all the familiar structures that normally constrain your thinking, they finally crystallize into clarity. You are not a warrior. You will never be a warrior in any meaningful sense. The age of warfare is over, and whatever new age is emerging does not seem to have a genuine place for samurai except as administrators and ceremonial figures. But perhaps that is not entirely negative. Perhaps the fact that you are not needed as a warrior means that the country is at peace, that people can live without constant fear of war and violence. Is that not a good thing? Is it not preferable to have too many warriors in peacetime than too few in wartime? And if your life as a samurai is not going to be about glorious battles and heroic deeds, then perhaps it can be about smaller things. About performing your duties with integrity, even when they seem meaningless. About showing kindness when you can, as you try to do with the village headman during the inspection tour. About maintaining your dignity and humanity in a system that often seems designed to crush both. This is not the romantic ideal of Bushido presented in the old texts, but it is something. And perhaps it is enough. You sit in the courtyard until dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky. You have not resolved all your doubts. You have not found perfect peace or enlightenment. But you have reached a kind of acceptance, a willingness to continue this strange life you have been given, to find what meaning you can in it. The diplomatic mission concludes successfully. Treaties are signed. Agreements are reached. The entire delegation prepares to return to Japan. On your last day in Korea, you walk through the streets of Busan one final time. You watch Korean merchants setting up their stalls, children running and playing, old people sitting in the sun. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, much like people in Japan. You realize that you will probably never return here. This brief window into a different world is closing. Soon you will board the ship, cross the sea, return to the castle compound and your duties in the tax office. Everything will go back to how it was. Except it cannot really go back. You have changed. You have seen things that you cannot unsee, thought things that you cannot unthink. The narrow world of the castle compound will feel even more constraining now that you know what exists beyond it. But you will endure it. Because that is what samurai do. They endure. They fulfill their duties. They maintain their dignity and honor even when the circumstances make it difficult. The voyage home is uneventful, calm seas, clear weather, a sense of anticlimax after the months of foreign service. When Japan's coast appears on the horizon, you feel a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at returning safely. Disappointment that the adventure is over. Apprehension about resuming your old life. The delegation is greeted with ceremony when you arrive at the castle. The daimyo himself receives a report from Matsudura Nobuyuki. You and the other junior samurai who participated in the mission receive formal commendations for your service. These commendations are recorded in your permanent records and will theoretically be considered if future opportunities for advancement arise. But in practical terms, nothing has changed. Your stipend is still the same. Your rank is still the same. After a few days of rest, you are expected to report back to the tax office and resume your duties. And this is what you do. You return to your desk, to the familiar piles of documents, to the endless calculations and reports. Saito-sama is still there, still critical, still finding fault with minor details. The other samurai in your office are still there, going through the same motions, living the same lives. It is as if the past 6 months never happened. Except they did happen. And while the external circumstances of your life remain unchanged, something internal has shifted. You can now look at your duties with a degree of perspective, can see them as part of a larger system rather than as the total extent of your existence. This does not make the work more enjoyable, but it makes it more bearable. Time continues to pass. Your 29th year, your 30th, your 31st. The routine of samurai life in peacetime continues. Day after day, month after month, year after year. You finally marry at age 31, after your parents arrange a match with the daughter of another mid-ranking samurai family. Your wife, Akiko, is 24, quiet and dutiful, raised to be a proper samurai wife. You barely know each other before the wedding, and the first months of marriage are awkward, two strangers sharing a small house trying to establish some kind of functional partnership. But gradually, a kind of affection develops. Not the dramatic romantic love of poetry and tales, but something steadier and perhaps more valuable. Genuine companionship, mutual respect, shared purpose in building a household. Akiko is practical and intelligent. She manages your limited finances with impressive skill, stretching your inadequate stipend further than you would have thought possible. She maintains the house, interacts with other samurai wives, navigates the complex social hierarchies of the castle town with a grace that you admire. You do not share your doubts and questions with her. How could you? She has been raised to respect the samurai ideal just as much as you were. To tell her about your growing skepticism of Bushido, your sense that the whole system is a kind of elaborate fiction, would be to undermine her understanding of the world. So you keep these thoughts private. You perform your duties as a husband, providing for the household, maintaining proper appearances, treating her with the respect due to your wife. And in return, she performs her duties, managing the home, eventually bearing children, supporting your role as a samurai. A son is born in your 33rd year. You name him Takashi, a strong name for a boy who will grow up to be a samurai like his father and grandfather before him. The birth of your son should be a moment of pure joy. And there is joy, certainly, the wonder of holding this tiny new life, the satisfaction of fulfilling your obligation to continue the family line. But there is also something darker. As you look at your infant son, You know what awaits him? He will grow up in the same system that has constrained you. He will be trained from childhood in martial arts he will likely never use in combat. He will be indoctrinated with ideals that he will struggle to apply to the mundane reality of peacetime bureaucracy. He will face the same pressures, the same narrow paths, the same slow grinding away of hope and individuality. And you will be the one to initiate him into this system. You will be the one to teach him swordsmanship, to tell him stories of samurai honor, to prepare him for a life of service to the clan. You will become for him what your father was for you, a transmitter of tradition, the enforcer of expectations. Can you do this? Can you raise your son to embrace values that you increasingly question? The answer, you realize, is yes. You can and you will. Because what is the alternative? To raise him outside the system is impossible. He was born into a samurai family, and nothing can change that. To explicitly teach him skepticism toward Bushido would be to set him up for unhappiness and failure, marking him as someone who does not fit properly into his designated role. So you will do what countless generations of samurai fathers have done. You will teach him the forms, the techniques, the ideals. You will train him to be a proper samurai. And if years from now he develops his own doubts and questions, he will have to work through them on his own, just as you have. This realization is sobering. You are not just a prisoner of the system. You are also its perpetuator, its instrument of reproduction. By raising your son as a samurai, you ensure that the system continues into the next generation. But again, what choice do you have? This is the life you were given. This is the role you must play. To refuse would be to abandon your duty, to bring shame upon your family, to leave your son without a position or future. So you embrace it. Not with enthusiasm, perhaps, but with acceptance. You become a father, teaching your son the same lessons you were taught, hoping that he will find more meaning in them than you have. The years continue. Your son grows from infant to child to adolescent. You watch him begin his martial training, see him struggle with the same difficulties you struggled with. Observe him gradually being shaped by the system that shaped you. Sometimes he asks questions that echo your own childhood questions. Father, why do we train so hard if there are no battles to fight? Father, what is the point of being a samurai in an age of peace? And you give him the answers you were given. Answers about discipline and character development. Answers about maintaining traditions and readiness. Answers that sound hollow even as you speak them. But what else can you say? Your position in the tax office does eventually improve slightly. In your 37th year, you receive a small promotion, not a dramatic change, but enough to increase your stipend modestly and give you slightly more authority over junior clerks. It is the first real advancement in your entire career. The promotion comes not because of exceptional performance, but simply because of seniority. You have survived long enough, made few enough serious errors, maintained acceptable standards of competence. This, apparently, is sufficient for modest rewards in the rigid system of samurai bureaucracy. You are now entering middle age. Your hair is beginning to gray at the temples. Your body does not recover from training as quickly as it once did. The aches and pains that you could once ignore now require attention. You are becoming your father, a middle-aged samurai, going through the motions, counting the years until retirement. Is this all there is? Is this the sum total of a samurai life in the year 1670? Training and paperwork, modest promotions and rigid hierarchies, maintaining appearances and suppressing doubts? Looking back over your life, you try to identify moments of genuine significance, times when you made a real difference or experienced something profound. The diplomatic mission to Korea stands out as one such moment. The birth of your son, another. A few instances when you were able to show mercy or kindness in your administrative duties, recommending tax relief for deserving villages, treating petitioners with respect even when you had to deny their requests. These are not the heroic deeds celebrated in samurai tales, but they are something. Small acts of decency in a system that often seems designed to eliminate human warmth. Moments of genuine experience in a life otherwise dominated by ritual and routine. Perhaps this is the real meaning of Bushido in the modern age. Not grand gestures of loyalty and sacrifice, but small choices to maintain one's humanity in dehumanizing circumstances. Not perfect embodiment of warrior ideals, but honest effort to be decent despite the pressures to be merely functional. This interpretation would probably be rejected by the purists, by the samurai who insist that Bushido must be practiced exactly as described in the classical texts. But those samurai, you have noticed, are often the ones who have never faced any genuine test of their values, who live in their own bubbles of privilege and security, who can afford to be idealistic because they have never been forced to confront complexity and ambiguity. You have lived a different life. You have seen the gap between ideal and reality. You have made compromises, followed orders you disagreed with, maintained appearances you did not believe in. You have survived in a system that demands conformity while supposedly celebrating honor and authenticity. And somehow, despite everything, you have maintained something essential. Some core sense of yourself, some capacity for honest reflection, some recognition of what matters beyond the elaborate pretenses of status and protocol. This is your victory, small and private as it is. You have not become entirely what the system tried to make you. You have preserved some space for doubt, for questions, for seeing things as they really are rather than as you are supposed to see them. On a cold winter evening in your 43rd year, you sit in your small garden, watching the last light fade from the sky. Your son is now 10 years old, already showing signs of the serious, disciplined person he will become. Your wife is inside, preparing the evening meal. Your parents are both still alive, though aging and increasingly frail. By the standards of samurai life, you have been successful enough. You have a family, a position, a modest but stable income. You have served your clan without major failure or disgrace. Your name will be recorded in the clan registers, and after your death, your son will take your place in the system, continuing the family line. This should be satisfying. This should feel like accomplishment. But sitting here in the gathering darkness, you mostly feel tired. Tired of the pretenses. Tired of the rigid protocols. Tired of the gap between what samurai claim to be and what they actually are. And yet, paradoxically, you also feel something like peace. You have learned to accept this life, to find small satisfactions within its constraints, to maintain your dignity without being crushed by expectations you cannot meet. The stars begin to appear, the same stars that hung over you decades ago when you first woke before dawn for morning training, when you crossed the sea to Korea, when you held your newborn son. The same stars that will be there long after you are gone, after your son is gone, after the Matsudaira clan and the Tokugawa shogunate and the entire system of samurai rule has faded into history. Everything is impermanent. This difficult, constrained, often frustrating life you have lived, it will end. The system that has defined you will eventually transform or disappear. Nothing lasts. This should be depressing. But somehow tonight it is comforting. Your struggles and failures do not matter as much as you thought. But neither do they matter less. They are simply part of the vast flowing stream of human experience, one man's attempt to find meaning and dignity in the circumstances he was given. You have been a samurai in feudal Japan, not a legendary warrior or a great hero, just an ordinary man in an extraordinary social role, trying to navigate between ideals you could not achieve and realities you could not escape. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is all anyone can do. Live with awareness and integrity within whatever constraints they face, maintaining their humanity as best they can, finding small moments of beauty and connection amid the difficulty and limitation. The moon rises, casting pale light across your garden. Inside, you hear your wife calling that the meal is ready. Your son's voice responding. The ordinary sounds of household life. You stand, feeling the stiffness in your knees, the weight of your years. You will go inside, eat the simple meal, spend time with your family, rest briefly before another day begins. Tomorrow you will wake before dawn. You will train in the cold morning air. You will process documents in the tax office. You will maintain the appearances and fulfill the duties that define samurai existence. This is your life. It is not what you imagined as a child. It is not what the old stories promised. But it is yours. And you have lived it as honestly as you could, with whatever grace and dignity you could muster. That will have to be enough. The night deepens. The stars shine down with their ancient, indifferent light. And you, Tanaka Masayuki, samurai in service to the Matsudaira clan in the year 1670, walk slowly back toward the warm glow of your house, toward your waiting family, toward whatever remains of your life. And now, as our long night's journey draws to a close, let us step back from Tanaka's individual story and consider what it reveals about samurai life in this era. The popular imagination sees samurai as noble warriors, living by an exalted code, their lives filled with honor and purpose. But the reality for most samurai, especially in the long peace of the Tokugawa period, was far more ambiguous. They were men trapped between a martial identity and a bureaucratic reality, expected to embody warrior values in a world that no longer needed warriors. This created a profound existential tension. Samurai trained relentlessly in martial arts they would likely never use in combat. They studied texts on honor and loyalty while working as paper pushers and tax collectors. They maintained elaborate pretenses about their status and importance while often struggling financially and living with constant anxiety about their position. The Bushido Code, which today is often presented as an ancient and unchanging set of principles, was actually being actively constructed and refined during this period, partly as a way for the samurai class to justify its continued existence and privileges. If samurai could no longer prove their worth through warfare, they would prove it through superior moral character, refined culture, and perfect discipline. But this ideological response to their changing circumstances did not eliminate the underlying tension. Samurai still had to navigate the gap between ideal and reality, between what they were supposed to be and what they actually were. Some embraced the ideals wholeheartedly, finding genuine meaning in the discipline and cultural refinement of peacetime samurai life. Others became cynical, going through the motions while privately recognizing the absurdity of their position. Most, like Tanaka, fell somewhere in between, maintaining outer conformity while harboring inner doubts, trying to find whatever authentic meaning they could within a system that often seemed designed to prevent authenticity. The samurai experience during this period offers a broader lesson about human adaptation to changing circumstances. When the original purpose of a social role disappears, but the role itself persists, those occupying that role must find new ways to justify their existence. Sometimes this leads to genuine innovation and transformation. Sometimes it leads to elaborate fictions maintained for the sake of institutional continuity. The samurai chose primarily the latter path. Rather than fundamentally reimagining what it meant to be a warrior class in an age without war, they doubled down on traditional ideals while accepting bureaucratic reality. This allowed the system to continue functioning, but at a significant personal cost to individual samurai who had to live within this contradiction. And yet, within these constraints, men like Tanaka found ways to maintain their dignity and humanity. They performed their duties with integrity even when those duties seemed meaningless. They showed kindness when they could. They thought critically about their circumstances even when they could not change them. They found beauty in small moments, a poem, a quiet conversation, the play of moonlight in a garden. This, perhaps, is the real legacy of the peacetime samurai. Not the mythology of perfect honor and glorious battles, but the more human story of people trying to live with awareness and decency in difficult circumstances, maintaining their inner life even when their outer life was strictly controlled, finding meaning in the midst of constraint. And so our story ends. Not with a dramatic battle or heroic sacrifice, but with an ordinary evening, a middle-aged samurai returning to his house for dinner with his family. This is how most samurai lived and died in feudal Japan. Not in glory, but in quiet endurance. Not as legendary heroes, but as human beings doing their best to navigate a complex and often contradictory social role. Their stories are no less worthy for their ordinariness. Indeed, perhaps they are more worthy, more instructive, more honestly human than the myths we prefer to tell. I hope this journey into the daily reality of samurai life has given you a more nuanced understanding of what it actually meant to be a warrior in feudal Japan. The truth is always more complex and more interesting than the legend. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for traveling with me through these hours, back into history, into the life and consciousness of someone whose world was so different from ours and yet, in fundamental ways, so similar. May you sleep well, and may your dreams be peaceful. This has been Gears of History. Good night.